Hello and welcome to Stork'd, the podcast in which we explore the many ways people build and define family. I am really excited to introduce Kelly Fay to you today. Kelly and I met at a mutual friend's wedding, and it was one of those, I don't know if you ever have those experiences where you're just like, we're connecting after the wedding. It was the day after, we were enjoying the brunch, and you start to meet the people at the wedding whose faces were familiar from the dance floor, although this dance floor was socially distanced because it's a pandemic. So, the blurry face of somebody from way over there, and you finally sit down and get to have a conversation with that person. And there was something about Kelly that just clicked for me immediately. I just felt so connected to her as a human, and you are going to hear why. She has so much heart and so much vulnerability and just beauty in the way she's thinking about who she is and who she's becoming. A lot of that stems from her being an adoptee. She is exploring her relationship with adoption and her adopted parents. Some of it comes from recently having met her biological family, and some of it comes from just this deep, deep, wise place of choosing to explore all the crevices and corners of your soul. One thing that's really special about this episode, and it is a Stork'd first, is that in preparation to have the conversation with me, Kelly, who is a photographer and a poet, decided to put her emotions around her adoption into a poem. And so she's going to read that poem for us today. And it is a powerful one. I get chills just thinking about it. So stay for the poetry, stay for Kelly's story. And if you like it, leave Stork'd a great review. Follow us on Instagram, follow Kelly on Instagram. I really hope you enjoy this one because it is coming from a place of depth, and that's really special. Kelly, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much, Julia. I really appreciate you inviting me on Stork'd. And in advance of coming on here, I explored my own story at a deeper level and crafted a poem that I'd like to share.
That is so exciting.
Thank you so much. First time sharing. So here we go. Introduce yourself. Kelly Fay, adoptee. Pause. Before we even begin. No, I don't let it define me. Chain me, keep me caged, victim. Conversely, free. 29 years to express this, truly. Given life, the offering. Allowed to be intrinsically seen, see me, my wounds. Cavernous, stitched, still healing. 26 years of abstained inquiry, abandonment. Numb, reeling, caring for others who needed healing, valuing material over my own well-being, vehemently still, crying for my mother, ripped from her womb, never to be touched in formless, gone, a father never to appear. Or am I wrong? Can I be all of these things for me? Capacity, untouched. Sturdy commitment to feel, to observe a word, free. Push against the ruinous corners of my repressed memory, to relive the unanswered screams beckoning. Won't you love me? Aren't I worthy? Inherently, cementing the cemetery of my dreams, shackled by fear, for I did feel unworthy to be me. Then it came bursting, rushing, all at once through my lived query, scrutiny, scrutinizing, memorizing little details of a constructed being, social cues of who I should be, could be, to be loved, worthy, accepted, not me, molded, vapid, gray, dingy hues, foundationally scant, mocked for being brought into this world, mocked for existing. 1998, terrified. The Kelly girl. Trembling, delicate soul, petrified. 8 years old or so, cold. A new inquiry. Why even be? The darkness revealed a well into which I slipped, intentionally. A measurable volume echoed inside my head, misunderstood by those around. A fallacy? What even is reality? Fuck your constructs, expectations of me. The ego restrains true expressivity. Pause. The light sneaks in, brighter yet, whispering ancestral knowings carved. A fossil. Revived. Ribbit, confirms the frog. Dimensionless, limitless, free. Now I realize the chains locked at their root, sunken into corporeal debts, locked shut, questioning potentiality, yet all along I held the key. Profundity, deep, rapturous waves, clean. So who are you, stranger? Knowing, illusory dangers unchained. Who do you want to be? Now the fun begins, a new set of circumstances lived, a life worth living, in process, becoming me.
It's so special. That is so powerful. And I want to thank you first for sharing that with us. It clearly comes from a place of deep reflection and a lot of artistry.
Thank you.
There's so much to unpack in this. I think I've got a lot of questions, but before I jump in, tell us about how it felt to write and then share that.
To write it was extremely cathartic. These are pieces of myself I didn't allow myself to feel or explore much in my prior 29 years. And so to put word to paper and let it out, it felt like I was letting go of everything that held me back. And I truly was embodying this freedom that I speak about.
And what was holding you back?
Fear of being myself, not feeling safe as myself.
There were a couple parts in the poetry that jumped out at me as being a little bit different in tonality. And one of the parts was the 8 years old. That was like a very punctuated component of the piece. What was happening then?
Yeah. So that's the age at which I was told that I was adopted, but it didn't come from my parents. I was at a friend's house on a play date, so to say. And my friend, who was a year older than me, turned to me and said, "Did you know you were adopted?" And that threw my world. I didn't even know what that meant, really.
How did your friend come to be in a position of knowing this really important component of your identity before you did?
My parents and her parents were friendly through us hanging out. And I believe her mother must have told her, and I'm unsure as to why, specifically because I did not know. But to entrust a 9-year-old with that, I feel like the outcome that did occur could have been anticipated.
It's inevitable, right? Like kids, they don't know what secrets are necessarily. It would be inappropriate to tell a child to keep a secret. So it was bound to come out to some
Right.
extent.
Yeah.
So what ensued from that? You know, you're headed down this one trajectory, and then age 9, you are startled with a revelation that came from a child about your own adoptive history. And then it sounds like for the next 11 years, you've been trying to figure that out. I don't even know if I did the math right. 21 years? Whatever.
21. Thankfully, this isn't not a math podcast.
This is not a math podcast. Tell us about, what happened once you found out that you were adopted.
So after I found out I was adopted, I went and entrusted that information into a friend. And you could probably guess what happened. She told other people, even though I asked her not to. Again, 8 years old. And the people that she told their older siblings who were in like 5th grade. And I remember distinctly a day on a playground and everyone's asking me if I'm adopted and telling me that I don't have a family and that I am not loved. And that to me was the day I shut down as Kelly Fay. I abandoned who that was because that wasn't safe anymore. And I thank the powers that be. My teacher at that time, she had a son that was adopted. So she knew how to like nurture and care for me in the classroom setting that helped me feel safe. But that was the first time I ever cried in school.
Oh my gosh.
And I
can't
just
imagine
felt
how destabilizing and horrific that would have been to be essentially bullied for your adoption.
Yeah. I mean, it's fully out of my control, as other people struggle with their identities, these things that we don't really control. When you're told they're wrong, they really destroy you if you don't have the self-confidence to help yourself.
Yeah. So tell me, when this teacher was nurturing you and she was able to support and hold you in that space, what was she doing that allowed you to feel cared for?
I mean, she would take extra time to speak with me before or after class. I wouldn't say she gave me special privileges by any means, but she just took a deeper interest in seeing if I was okay. And the other thing is that at home, when that event happened, like my parents were called to the school, but beyond that, they never put me in therapy. They never asked about it. And I know now, because they never dealt with their own trauma, they were just a suck it up and keep moving forward. They thought I'd get over it. And that resulted, I did not.
Yeah.
No. I can laugh about it now, but it was a little rough for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm fascinated that you have a teacher, this juxtaposition about the adults in your life. You have this teacher who recognizes that you need a little extra nurturing, and you've got parents who are choosing to say, essentially, suck it up or move past it. As you continue to grow and evolve into your teenagehood and beyond, how did the adult relationships play out in your life?
Very good question, Julia. I was always told that I was difficult. I was told I was overly emotional. I was always complimented and put on a pedestal for all my achievements. I thankfully was naturally gifted in school, music, sport. Like, I don't know why I was given all these tools and talents, but I was, and thankfully that helped me feel love. But again, that was the external validation that if I'm achieving, then I'm worthy. And that led me to burnout in multiple jobs and career, and just generally become this perfectionist overachiever.
Did your parents actively celebrate the achievements? Where did the feeling of needing to achieve come from?
Yeah, I think it also had to do specifically more with my mom. My dad was more of the nurturer, and my mom and I didn't have that emotional connection. And so I felt her love through the achievements, through celebrating, oh, you got an A. Oh, you did this. Oh, you got into that. Oh, that's incredible. And that's how she would talk about me to friends and family. And otherwise, there was no acknowledgement. And then beyond that, she was in the education system. So she was very much a stickler on, if I wasn't sick, I was not allowed to rest. So going to school, if I didn't feel well, but I didn't have a fever, I still had to go to school. I had to push forward. So that taught me subconsciously, I was not worthy of rest unless there was a serious reason. And that might seem small, but when it adds up over your entire adolescent upbringing.
You've used the word, both in your poem and in this conversation, worthy or unworthy, a number of times. I'm curious how much of that is the style of parenting you received and how much of that is related to your adoption.
Yeah, I don't know that I have an answer to that, but I love the inquiry. I think it's both. I think there's this primal, from an adoptee perspective, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the whole adoption community, but there's this primal separation from your mother at birth that is very difficult to understand. But I think that in and of itself, when you call for your mother and she's not there ever, then you feel worthless.
Yeah.
Because that's taken away from you. And that's the one thing you need.
And that's your birth mother that you're calling.
Correct. And then to not have as strong of a relationship with my adoptive mother, I think grew that wound deeper.
How have you developed a sense of worthiness now as an adult? Or have you?
I definitely have. 2 weeks ago was the first time I looked in the mirror and told myself, I love you. And I felt it in my entire life.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
You said, I love you to yourself.
No, I've tried to say I love you to myself, but I never felt it. And I felt it 2 weeks ago.
What did it feel like?
I had this warmth come over me. I felt safe in myself. I felt like I am just grounded in who I am and it's okay, whatever happens around me.
You're telling me about this warmth that comes over yourself, this sense of feeling safe when you first say, I love you to myself. And I'm just recognizing how powerful that first moment of feeling your own self love is. It's just so deep. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So beyond the warmth, the power of it actually brought me to my knees and I was in tears because that's something I sought in so many other people and things and measures throughout my life, be it career, family, literally material goods.
Yeah.
So to know that I could give that to myself, it really dropped all the other pressure that I don't need to seek this feeling outside of me. So in that aspect, it changed my life. And it's not to say I can feel that way every single day. And it takes work and commitment to renew that since I felt it for the first time. But I know that it's there and I know that it's possible. And that feels hopeful within itself.
I really love that. I love the description of feeling the power of self love that you've just offered us.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also just the offering that you've shared about recommitting to it and that it's something that you have to practice.
Yeah, it's a lifelong journey. I'm learning, even though we're not even a year into this piece, but I'm ready. I think it's worth it.
The beginning phases of a lifelong journey.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So when you hear the word adopted or when you say I am adopted, how have your feelings around that statement evolved over time?
So, I mean, when I was younger, I denied it after I was made fun of for it.
So you would tell people I'm not adopted.
Yeah, I'd say, nope, they're my parents. Even to the point that I would get such anxiety getting my nails done because the individual giving me a manicure like would see my parents and say, why are you so tall? Your mom and dad are short. And I would be like, oh, my mom has a tall brother, which she did. But I was like, maybe it skipped their genes.
You're claiming these genes.
Yeah.
And defending yourself to a manicurist.
Yeah. So not until I met someone else that was adopted in 6th grade, so when I went to middle school, did I feel safe to say that I was adopted because they had this group of people that accepted them and they never thought anything of it.
Has it affected your dating life?
Oh, yeah. So this may be more of the parenting piece, but with the adoption, not having my needs met by my biological mother, just primarily calling out, and then not having those needs met by my mother, my adopted mother, and my dad being the nurturer, that's where I found safety. So I then looked to external male relationships to find safety. And because I wasn't safe in myself, I was actually finding people that needed to be healed. And so not until I was in a relationship where I felt like I was shrinking and I was questioning my purpose in life. I'd always dealt with depression on and off, but this felt deeper than that. And so I sought the help of a psychologist and we dove into my story, my journey, etc. And that kind of helped. But things never got better in my relationship. And I was living with this individual and we ended up getting engaged and things just got even worse. But I was waking up to like, okay, this person's not healed and they have no intention of healing and they don't support me in my healing. So I need to go figure out how to make myself fully whole before I could ever be with someone else again. But in terms of my journey of like coming back to myself and healing this piece of me and accepting it, it progressed from talk therapy with 4 to 5 different cognitive behavioral psychologists, as well as counselors. And then I found spirituality. And that for me really allowed me the introspection I needed and the opportunity to take more accountability and see myself. Like it helped me figure myself out, if that makes sense.
The reason I asked that question when I did is because sometimes I think that the way in which we inhabit friendships teaches us what we will later do in relationships. So when you talk about the loss of your friends as being this like really transformative element of your experience, it made me wonder about your dating life.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but that makes sense.
I mean, don't take that. I'm not a psychiatrist. I've noticed that, you know, some of my friends have been my best teachers for how I want to show up in partnership. And some of them have been my worst teachers.
Right. Yeah. And I find now like I'm outgrowing a lot of people that I never thought I would. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I find like friendships or people in my life come and go sometimes. Like sometimes you just have to let somebody go off on their journey and do what they need to do. And they sometimes come back and you pick up where you left off. It's kind of great.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, so I think it's so exciting. I feel like, and maybe this is a perception that you don't want to take on for yourself. So if so, say, no, you're wrong. But I feel like I'm meeting you a month ago and now again at a place where you have done a lot of the deep, heavy work around transformation. And you're just about to step into this like big, wide world that's now open to you. If I'm right about that, where are you going? What is opening up for you?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I would say you're spot on. And every day is a new step toward that. So where am I going? I'm leaning more into my artistic self than I ever have. I think I relied on my analytical brain because it could bring me tangible and external validation. So money, possessions, and freedom, quote unquote, in that sense, or as we know it in this capitalistic society. But my soul never felt free. Like I felt like I was shrinking, working in merchandising and these corporate roles that really didn't allow me to be myself, but I didn't know I needed to be myself. So now as I step forward, I'm learning how to integrate that into my career.
And integrating your creative self into your professional career.
Yeah. And right now, though, I do work at a startup and I lead marketing, which is very creative. I have more autonomy over my work and I get to build this company from the ground up. So that paired with my external crafts, if you will, I feel like I'm fully stepping into like driving purpose forward through my gifts.
It's so cool that you're building a company at the same time you're really building the next phase of your life. Now,
Thank you.
At one point, you had told me a little bit about the fact that you have met your birth family or members of your birth family. Would you like to share any of that now?
Yeah, I can do that. It's definitely still fresh. So yeah, I'll give you the backstory too. So someone in my family shared an article with me when I was in like about to enter high school that had been published like 10 plus years prior. And I don't know why they chose that time or to share with me in general, but it had to do with my biological mother being killed in a car accident and who she was survived by. And it listed a son who would have been my brother, biological brother, and gave his full name. So I then chose to try and find him. And I found him on MySpace. And I sent him a message, one of probably the most awkward messages.
Yeah.
Hey.
What do you say in that moment?
Yeah, I tried to approach it as gently as I could and said, I'm not sure if you're aware. Maybe ask your family. I have details of who I think your mother is, and I may be your sister. Very odd. There's really no way to go about that.
It's going to be an awkward conversation, particularly when facilitated by MySpace.
Yeah.
Right? Which was a platform for awkwardness of all kinds. Anyway.
Yeah.
But that one is a very hard thing to say.
Definitely.
And how did he react?
I don't think I got a response for a little while. And then he came back and said, yeah, I spoke with my family and they said, yeah, you are my sister. And then from there, we grew this internet connection and we shared things pretty surface level. Like, what sports do you play? What do you do? Like, what are you naturally good at? Like, I had questions about our mother, but she had passed away when he was so young. I would have only been 2 years old. So that really grounded me into gratitude, but I still couldn't like accept my parents as my own still because I couldn't accept myself as being adopted.
So when you say you're grounded into gratitude, am I hearing that you gained an appreciation for the life that you were able to access as a result of your adoption?
Yeah. And that came like fully to fruition when I met them in person November 2019.
So recently.
Very recently. Yes. So that toxic relationship I referenced when I moved back to New York from where I was in Texas. And I was at a point of upheaval in every capacity of my life, trying to figure out who I am, what I need. And then I said, what the hell? Let me reach out to my half brother, which I learned we had different fathers, and he was fully accepting. And I met my aunts, so my mother's sisters and cousins and a lot of family members. It was wild. I can say, like, immediately meeting them, I just felt connected to them. Like, it didn't feel awkward. And they were open books. They're like, what do you want to know? And so,
Oh, that's so lovely to have somebody
yeah.
just say, like, I will share. Go for it. So what did you ask?
Yeah. I mean, I asked about my birth mother and asked about who she was and what drove her, and the story they told. That's like really when the gratitude opened itself to me, because she had all these gifts, but circumstantially lived a life that didn't allow her to express them and step into that piece of her. And so it gave me this deeper sense of purpose to show up for myself and live this life that she could never live.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge gift. That sounds like this meeting, this reconnection, was a really important pivot point almost.
It was.
So one of the things we connected over when you and I first met is I was sharing my experience in Colombia and visiting an orphanage. And one of the things that this orphanage is doing now is, in attention to how disruptive adoption can be for certain children, trying to work with families to keep kids in the home safely for as long as possible, rather than immediately choose to remove them and adopt them out. So it seems like the adoption community has shifted its perspective on what might be best for the child. Looking back on your life, do you wish you had had a different experience? Do you wish that there were services supporting you in that home life with your mom? Or do you now see that the path that you ended up in is the better fit?
No, I wouldn't have wanted to have gone through the experience of staying with my birth mother and then really never knowing her at all. So, like, I was given this opportunity to go into a home with two parents that were committed to taking care of me from the time that I was brought into their lives. So I think I was 8 days old. And although they never necessarily had all the tools that would have helped me face some of my own trauma from the experience, I wouldn't have wanted it another way. And my mother's siblings did share that when she was pregnant with me, intuitively, she felt like she couldn't care for me. And so she needed to give me up for adoption. And in that time, like, it still wasn't that common. And that's also why I feel a deeper purpose to figure out why I'm here and how I can help the world.
I hate to do this, but why are you here? Like, how are you going to help the world? I know that's a question nobody has an answer for. We're all working on it. But it sounds like you've started to have some aha moments about that. Do you have an intuitive sense for what you might like to bring forth?
Yeah, I think as of late, to see such hate in the world, to see such overt unconsciousness, intuitively where I think I can bring the most impact is through building community and giving adolescents the tools that they need to be whole into themselves, so that these external factors don't disrupt them. They're not as bothered by tech. Like, that's a big thing that comes to me. This need to be someone else through, like, these external validators like social media. So teaching them to unearth what's inside of them and know that that's enough, because that's my wound. So a very special person that our shared link, Maddie Murphy of the Cosmic Revolution, just shared with me, turning your wound into your wand. So yeah.
You're making it your superpower.
Yeah. So just showing up for community in the way that I needed.
You're referencing Maddie, and I love this concept of turning your wound into your wand. It's just like it conjures up such magical images of powerful princesses who can remake their own worlds. How has this concept of turning your wound into your wand changed your relationship with your parents?
So overall, since I've understood that I'm the one who can heal myself and that I'm the one that has the power within me to love myself more than anyone else potentially could, I've released expectation of them to understand me as much. And I've released this need for their validation of who I am and where I'm going. I mean, they're still my parents at the end of the day, so it's not easy said and done. One clip and we're moving forward. It's a process, but it's released a lot of the power, if you will, that their opinions had over how I lived my life and the decisions that I made.
Do you feel like by letting go of that, you're building a deeper sense of connection with your parents?
Yes. In most aspects, yes. I still feel that there's a lot that they don't understand. So that does still pain me. They had factors that didn't allow them to have a child biologically. And from that, they actively chose to be parents. They adopted me. Their story, it sounds pretty wild. They set up an independent phone line in the house whereby adoption agencies would cold call them. They had ads in newspapers. They knew that when that phone rang, there was a child available for them. Like, they wanted me.
Yeah.
So they can't understand how any of their actions could have harmed me subconsciously. And I think, yeah, so across the board, this gratitude, quote unquote, that I should have for them as my parents for giving me this life, it's a paradox because I have such shame for existing. So I just kept shrinking into like this piece of like Kelly that was like hanging on until I felt like I had nothing left.
Oh my God. You want to just like go back in time and wrap you in a big hug.
Yeah, I really do. I find that the spirituality piece and meditation and energy healing has really helped a lot with all of that. And I can visit her, I can see her, I can make space for her and let her know it's okay. Yeah.
For little Kelly, yeah.
Yeah. The Kelly girl, as my family called me. Yeah, she was definitely a scared, sad child.
Oh, that's so heartbreaking.
It makes me sad that they can't understand why I'd feel pain about the adoption because they think that since I've been adopted and they've given me this life, and this extends to my family beyond my parents, that I, quote unquote, should be grateful more than any other feeling that I'm feeling. So more than the inherent unworthiness, more than the fear, more than these tendencies that caused me to become a perfectionist. And all of those things I'm unraveling, they think because I've been given a life where people really wanted me and they gave me this opportunity to live in a home that was a very comfortable upbringing with love and with adventure and excitement, they think that because I've been given those things, I shouldn't feel sad.
So it's almost like limiting your emotional experience to the one emotion, the gratitude, rather than accepting that you can have multiple emotions, including gratitude.
Exactly. And that's been a piece I've been trying to explain, I guess, educating. This is possible that I could feel XYZ emotions at the same time as I still feel gratitude. And because I feel these emotions doesn't mean I'm not grateful.
Right.
They're just still a part of my experience here.
Right. You could be happy and sad about something, and the two aren't mutually exclusive and don't invalidate one another. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Wow. That's really interesting. And so, can you name some of the emotions that you currently have? Is gratitude one of them?
Absolutely. I think gratitude is the North Star of emotions for me. Mainly through my spirituality practice, I find that waking up in gratitude, I'm able to face a lot more with poise and with a more open mind, I should say. So, because I'm grateful for every experience, for the hard, difficult experiences, because I know they're teaching me, and for the easier, joyful, free flowing experiences, because that's essentially a gift. And then beyond gratitude, compassion, patience. These latter two, I really still need to do more deep work on.
And those are compassion and patience with yourself, or compassion and patience with your family?
Both. Because there is a level of frustration and still not being understood.
Yeah.
And this healing journey is very new for me still.
So let me ask you this question. If your parents were to sit you down and turn to you and say, oh my gosh, we get it now. We get X. What would you want to hear from them? How would you want them to finish that sentence?
Yeah. We hear you. We understand how it could be difficult going through what you did. And we understand that that doesn't overpower the love that we still have as a family, that doesn't wash away or erase the good memories we have. And it's okay.
That would be really powerful to hear from any parent, right? To hear them say, like, I see you, I hear you, I love you.
Yeah. And that's okay. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with feeling what you did
Yeah.
or feeling what you do. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. Well, what do you want people to know about adoption as a result of sharing your story so beautifully and in both the spoken word of an interview format and the spoken word of a poem? What would you like us to know?
Thank you for asking. So this is a big one. Again, not speaking on behalf of all adoptees, but if you're going to consider adoption, contemplate the thought that your actions and your love may never be enough for that child. And that's not your fault, but they need the support. I'd ask you to ask yourself, are you sovereign and grounded in yourself, that their projections on you like aren't actually quote unquote because of you, and that shouldn't tear you apart? And then do you have the capacity and willingness to commit to make room for the empathy that's needed? Because this is a lifelong journey with an adoptee. It's not just, okay, we went to therapy, we're good now. It's a lot.
Wow. Wait, can you say that last one again? The capacity to be empathetic?
Yeah, to make room into your daily life, to recommit to empathy in your conversations, in trying to understand this individual.
So when I hear you say that, as somebody who's considering eventually adopting a child, maybe, one of the things that comes up for me is I hear like, oh, you might not be good enough as a parent to do this. Like, how does one know if you can be a good enough parent to an adopted child?
I think that goes back to my second statement. So, are you sovereign and know that you're going to show up as your best self and give the best of you that you can? I don't think there's a right and a wrong or an enough or not enough, but it's the effort and the daily commitment. Like, it takes a lot of commitment.
How about you? Do you feel like you would ever step into the role of a parent to an adopted child?
I would. The idea of having kids is something that scared me for a while. And then when my relationship became toxic, a big part of me leaving had to do with the fact that I could never bring children into that home. And I chose them and their safety and well-being, whoever they may be, over staying in that relationship.
Powerful motivator.
Yeah. And from the perspective of being an adoptee, adopting an adoptee, or I've released expectation of how I have a child at this point, but I know I want a child. And so I think I could show up for that child how I needed. But again, that may not be what they need. So it's about having that empathy to understand them as they are.
Yeah. Well, I want to wrap up with one question about the poem and one question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
The quick question about the poem is that I said that there were two spots where something really jumped out at me. The rhythm was so clear how you were going through this path, this inquiry, this journey. But then the other thing that jumped out at me, in addition to the question I had about your age 8, was something about a frog. What's the meaning of a frog?
Yeah. So that frog piece was actually a reference to these idealistic fairy tale relationships that I aspired to be in. And specifically, my most recent, the toxic relationship I keep referring to. On paper, I thought it was everything I wanted, but it was nothing that was good for me. That's why it was just a frog, not a prince.
I love that. Well, that's actually accidentally a full circle question, because it sounds like leaving this relationship is one of the catalysts that caused you to start thinking about adoption, and then to share your story with me at this wedding, and now to sit here at this podcast. So thank you so much. My last and final question is the one I ask at every interview, and that is, if you could define family in a word or a couple words or sentence, what does family mean to you?
This is the crux.
This is it, right?
Yeah. Well, I know it's certainly not just showing up. It's more than that. It's being heard. It's being seen. It's feeling accepted. And that goes both ways. It's amorphous. And maybe it's love. I struggle with this question a lot.
Yeah, I do too, which is what the whole podcast is. This is why this podcast exists. Isn't it unfair for me to expect my guests to answer it when I can't?
Yes, Julia.
But I like your definitions. What I heard you say is to be seen, which is something that was a big theme in your poem, to be empathetic, to show up with love. And that the amorphous thing, I think what I'm hearing is evolution, that it can be anything.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
use a lot of shape imagery, amorphous, shape, shapeless. It's interesting.
Yeah, maybe because, I've never consciously thought of that. So thank you. Maybe because I believe life is fluid at this point. I can say that firmly. So releasing expectation and living in the process of it all instead of focusing on what it should look like, could look like, just being.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
I was also thinking it might be the fact that you were a photographer in addition to being a poet and running a marketing department for a startup. So I was wondering if the shapes came from the way you visualize things.
Yeah, perhaps.
But that was a practical answer. Yours was way cooler. Kelly, I have loved talking to you. I always love talking to you, but particularly in this conversation. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to share now?
Thank you. This has been incredibly beautiful for me to be able to talk about my story, and I sincerely appreciate this opportunity. I would like to still share a big thank you for my parents, a thank you directly to them for the life that they've given me, for the opportunities they've given me, despite how hard it's been and how tumultuous I felt throughout it. I wouldn't want it another way.
That's really powerful. And it's just such a beautiful thing to have come such a long way. You know, your poem really articulates this major life transition, tackling and exploring some identity questions and frustrations that came up with it. So Kelly, you are, among so many things, a gifted poet and a really talented photographer. If we wanted to find you, if we wanted to read more of your poetry, or if we wanted to see your photography, or just generally connect and ask you questions or whatever, how do we do that?
So the best way right now would just be to reach me on Instagram. My handle is at the Kelly Fay. That's TheKellylYFAY. And I share predominantly photos there, but also I'll share some poetry. But overall, I'd really love to hear stories from the listeners as well. So I welcome you to share anything that may come up during this podcast, as well as questions or requests that you may have. Like if you want to read more of my work or anything, I'm happy to share and go deeper through messages on Instagram. So
that is such a gift to offer that space for people. And also it's such a gift to share this poem. You know, it's as I mentioned, it's the first time we've ever had a poem on Stork'd. It was a really, really special one. And I'm so grateful for you for sharing that with us.
Thank you so much. Like I said, it's the first time I've ever shared this publicly. So this was a new leaf that has been turned, and I appreciate you giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, the first of many.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.